$75,000. It's a rare, a rare thing. There aren't any. They only made about 1,000 of them, and things made out of wood and cloth don't last forever. But anyway, I have pictures of that and a video tape of the reconstruction process of the plane from these fellows that I would gladly share with anyone who would find that interesting. So I guess that's pretty much the story. One other little thing was the fact that during the war there was a need or a demand for hand combat weapons, and in the Remington Rand there was a group of people after hours, I guess you'd say, or moonlighting or something, used to make combat knives for the troops, and the folks at the Remington Rand made him a combat knife, which was kind of crude but effective. It was a double-edged knife that was long enough to just about go through a normal body. In other words, it was about 10 inches long, double-edged, and the handle terminated with a 50 caliber machine gun bullet just to make it fancy. Well, this, as I say, this knife was made and sent to Buzz in the South Pacific. However, he in his last letter, he says, "Boy, I sure needed a combat knife, would welcome one," knowing it was coming, but he never got it. It arrived too late, and it's hard to believe that the knife could go to the South Pacific and then come back to Elmira and not get stolen on the way on the trip. But as I say, it made the round trip, and I have that, and then I have different flying paraphernalia. There's helmet and goggles and navigation stuff and so on and so forth that goes along with that hobby. So I guess that's pretty much the story of Buzz Quinn. I don't know if there's anyone out there that, what do you say, would be interested in that story or not. But anyway, it's there in case someone is. So that's it.
I have a few questions for you. Would you like to have a seat? We've been
Oh,
sitting
sure.
for quite a while. I'm going to go ahead and let me just adjust the camera. We are. How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had one brother and one sister, and my brother was 14 years older than I, and my sister was 16 years older, and she was born in 1914, and Buzz was born in 1916,
So
and I was born in 1930, and I was
really the baby of the family.
caboose.
What did your folks do?
My father was, he worked for the Erie Railroad Company, and it kind of explains why my brother eventually wound up working with the Erie Railroad Company. And he was, I guess you'd call him, he was the yard master of the Erie Yards in Elmira. During that period of time, in the area of Washington Avenue, in fact, I think probably still, there may be tracks there. It was a very, very busy place with many, many railroad tracks, and it was an area where the trains were formed and disassembled for moving cargo around. And my father worked for the railroad company 62 years, which is quite a long time. He started out as a water boy, and then he just worked his way through the system until he got to where he was at when he finally retired. As I say, we were probably fortunate in that during that time period, we're talking about the Great Depression, 1929 and so on and so forth. A lot of people had virtually nothing to live on. We, between wild game and so on and so forth, we didn't have a lot, but we were lots better off than many of the people who were around at that time. An interesting thing was that during that period of time, which I forgot to mention, that President Roosevelt, I guess maybe it was in the early 1930s, developed a thing called the Civilian Conservation Corps, which is called the CCC. And in order to occupy and provide money for people who needed to be occupied and the money. They had these programs work programs where they would go out and build roads and bridges and so forth. There was a lot of activity up Benetton Way, Connecticut Hill, Arnott Forest area, and my brother, I guess you call it, enlisted in that. And that setup was that you earned $1 a day, and you got your room and your board, and they would pick you up on a Sunday night and take you out to the barracks. In my case, in my brother's case, it was in the Arnott Forest, Connecticut Hill area, and they had barracks out there. And you'd spend the week, and then you come back on the weekend, and then you'd make $6 or $7 for that. But you had your room and your board, and you got some experience in construction and so on and so forth. And as I say, as I understand, it was a worthwhile program because otherwise people wouldn't have a little extra money, and they wouldn't have had anything to do, and they've been idle, and idleness is not a good situation. So.
You said you were involved in this too? You enlisted in the CCC as well?
No, that was terminated probably, I'm guessing now, but I would say it was terminated probably in 1935 or 1936 is when it ended, because things began to recover. There was a recovery period, the war is coming. It wasn't a total surprise that the war developed. There were signals and everything, and then I guess it was no longer needed. But during that period, say from 1933 to 1936, it was a useful thing to have. So. Mm-hmm.
What was life like here in Elmira during the war for someone like you? You were, what, 14, 15 when it started?
Yeah, well, let's see, I was, let's see, how old was I? I was 13 when he died. So, well, I can remember quite vividly rationing. We lived up on Veteran Hill, which is north of Worcester. It's about 5 miles or so, and gas was a problem. But fortunately, due to the fact that my father was working in a critical field, in other words, the transportation to move the goods and the troops and so on and so forth, he was allowed extra gas to drive to work. But when it came to shoes and butter and meat and like that, we were like just everyone else. You used to have these coupons, which if you spent your coupon, that was the end of the shopping for you. And it was during that period of time people used to improvise. I remember as a kid, it's humorous now, if I got a hole in my shoe, I would cut a piece of cardboard out, put it in my shoe, and I'd limp along that way. And I can remember soles loose on my shoes and flopping. You take canning rubbers and put them around your shoe to keep the sole from flopping. But what the thing was, people darned socks. If you get a hole in your socks, you fixed it. If your shoe wore out and you didn't have a stamp to get it, you fixed it. And I remember that I learned to like, you didn't have sugar in great abundance. You learned to live on, you'd have saccharin as a sweetening thing. And also, I found that Cairo syrup poured on shredded wheat was pretty good. You know? And that was, put a little Cairo syrup on and some milk, and it was a tasty breakfast or snack. And the other thing you could do when it came to meat, which was not too available, we had our share of wild game because of my brother's ability as I figure he's a marksman. He did get marksman medals and things, so we always had wild foods, and it's comical. My father used to hunt, but I don't ever recall him getting anything. But we could always depend on having in season pheasant and partridge and whatever, which was pretty darn good, really. And as I say, things were tough. I can remember during that period of time there was a fear that we might be invaded or bombed, and we used to have air raid drills, and we had a farmer in the neighborhood was the air raid warden, I guess they used to call him, and they used to have these drills, and he would get in his old flivver, and in at night, you know, he'd drive up the road, and there was a series of toots of his horn. And when you heard those horns, you had to pull shade and turn all the lights off that you could, so that an airplane wouldn't see a light and take a bearing on it or something like that. So we were a long ways away from the fighting, but again, we were reacting to situations that might develop, you know. So, and I can't remember anything else about the rationing period. It was I remember when I was able to get a hunting license, the biggest problem was buying bullets, because all the bullets were going to the war zone. And if you were able to find a box of 22 shells or something, you were a pretty fortunate person. But those were very rare. A lot of people used to reload their own shells and stuff. I remember reloading shotgun shells, not because, I guess it was just an interesting thing to do, put marbles in instead of the shot and shoot marbles through the shotgun. I don't know why we survived doing some of the things we did, but we did. I know we used to, those marbles used to make the nicest round holes in doors when you shot it. You're perfectly round hole. Those are just kind of crazy things. I guess that's about all I can remember.
What about school? Did you guys have to do anything at school to contribute to the war effort?
Oh, sure, yes. We used to. I remember when I was a kid, when I was still at Lenox Avenue, I used to, it's kind of embarrassing, but I used to knit.
Okay.
And our assignment was to knit they're 5 or 6 inch squares. And when you put all these squares together, you got an Afghan. And I never put the squares together, but I used to knit squares, you know. We used to call it knitting for Britain. That was that went on. And
who taught you to knit? Was it the teacher, or did your mom have to teach
no, the teacher.
The
no,
teacher did.
They taught us in school. I was probably in the, oh golly, I don't know, probably the 4th or 5th grade, I guess. And yeah, that was one of the things we did. And then during the war, you had these, every week, they had savings bonds. It was money, revenue for the government to conduct the war. We used to buy savings bonds. Well, the lowest level savings bond during that period cost $18.75. Well, no one had $18.75, but you could come up with 25 cents a week, so you used to buy savings stamps. And then as soon as you got enough savings stamps, then you could buy that $18.75 bond, and then I think it was in 10 years or so that bond would mature and be worth $25. And they had different increments. They had $25 bonds, $50 bonds, $100 bonds, so on and so forth. But we were always at the low end of the scale with because we didn't have that much. But you didn't know any different. So we used to walk to school and snow that you wouldn't send your cat out in nowadays. But we didn't think anything of it. You'd grease your boots and things at night to make them waterproof and trudge off. During that time, a neighbor friend of mine, it was a one-room school that we used to go to prior to moving to the big metropolis of Horseheads. It was Veteran 13 was the number of the school, and my buddy and I used to go, be the first ones at school, start the fire in the wintertime, clean out the restrooms, which were outhouses, and pump the water and get everything ready for the kids to come. And we used to do this all year, and we split $25 for that, and but it was a way of life. You didn't think anything about it. And come fair time, we had money to go to the Chemung County Fair and spend that $25. So that's usually the way it went. And I remember we used to walk to school, and then when we completed the 8th grade, then we were bused to Horseheads. And I think I started in 1944, I guess I started going to Horseheads, but it wasn't a bus, it was someone's car, because there weren't that many kids. I think maybe the population of our school was only about 8 or 9, you know, and that was all the grades. So at any one time, you only had a couple of kids coming off the hill into the metropolis, you know. But eventually, after the centralization of the Horsehead School, by then we rode a bus. And unfortunately, for where we were situated, I was the first one on and the last one off the bus, and I would spend almost 2 hours a day just riding the bus to get to school, because instead of heading from my house 5 miles straight into town, we used to go north and collect everyone and then finally wind up at school, and then that reverse order in the evening. And I can remember during that time having the bus pick me up in Hanover Square on the corner of Ithaca, where Ithaca Road comes in. During that time, there was a farm store. It was called a GLF. I can't recall what those letters mean, but some kind of a League of Farmers or something. And the bus would pick me up there, and I would walk over earlier and get chicken feed, and I would haul chicken feed home on the school bus in order to get it there, because it was convenient and it was a necessity considering all the conditions that existed during that time. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now let me change my tape. I think our tape is almost done, and I have an extra tape here, so I'm just going to change it before we run out, and then I'd like you to show me what's in the box.
Okay.
I have a couple more questions too.
Okay. I hope I have answers.
This is the end of tape 1 of an interview for the Veterans History Project with Donald R. Quinn. Mr. Quinn was a teenager during World War II, and he shared his memories of his brother, William Quinn, who was a soldier in the Army during World War II. Today is December 3rd, 2002. We are at the Chemung County Historical Society. My name is Heather Wade, and I was the interviewer. This is tape 1 of 2 tapes. Do you remember when your brother left Elmira? How did he leave? What form of transportation? Was he already involved in the military? Did they supply the...
Well, the military supplied a troop train. He left Elmira, I think it was, as I say, it was October 27th in the evening, late evening, a troop train that wound up in Fort McClellan, Alabama, and I left on the Erie station in the Erie Depot, which I guess the building is still there. I don't think that there's any activity there anymore. But yeah, that's how he was, the military transported him away on a train as opposed to a bus or what other means of transportation might be available. Mm-hmm.
Did he enlist with friends?
No. Well, I'm sure that he knew some of the fellows who enlisted. As I recall, he and his buddy didn't go down and enlist. It just happened that maybe they met up down there or something like that. But as I say, his initial desire was to join the Air Force and fly, and he had this unbelievable passion for flying, and unfortunately he didn't succeed in maneuvering through the system as was suggested to him that he should do. And I personally, I've always felt that had he not done so much volunteering, well, obviously the outcome would have been different. Maybe because when he was in Hawaii, some of the fellows who were in his group, regiment or whatever, some of them wound up in Germany. There was a splitting of the troops, and some went to the South Pacific, and some went to the European campaign. And he had one fellow, his name was Ellery, not Ellery, it was Ward Mott. He went to the European campaign, and he was killed over there. And there was several fellows from Elmira here that we, they were just the local kids that didn't make it back. I have many pictures of many of the Gold Star guys. I call them, the fellows that were the victims of the war there that I have in my files. I have succeeded in getting the daily battle reports, the reports from the lieutenants and the captains and the majors of how the war was progressing. It's very interesting reading. You have to stay concentrate on it because it's kind of complicated, and you have to keep sorting things out as things develop. But it's kind of interesting reading to see what the conditions of the war were, the comparison of the weapons that were used. Apparently, our weapons were a lot better, but the Japanese, for instance, they had pretty good stuff too. And it's just interesting to see in greater detail than a person would normally, think. You don't think along those lines about whether someone's gun makes a lot more noise or whether you hear it at all. Some of them you didn't hardly hear them, and those were the tough ones because if someone shot at you, you didn't know where to shoot back because you weren't sure where that sound came from because it wasn't that much of a sound. So, but it was just a very tough theater to fight in because of the conditions, the disease and the weather itself, the mud, everything, and the enemy. The enemy was a very devoted enemy. They dying meant nothing to them. It was just the way that they were reared. They were brought up that for the emperor, and that's it. So.
Now, when your family received letters from your brother, how did you share them? How did you read the letters?
Well, the letters always came to my mother. They were always addressed to my mother, and then once it was received, then it was passed around to the family that was in, the interested members of the family. And the interesting thing was that my mother wrote a letter 2 times a week. And each letter, she used to fill it up with chewing gum. She would open up a pack of chewing gum and lay the individual sticks out sideways so it was thin, but she could get a pack of gum in there. And it turned out that gum was a very welcome thing because those guys couldn't get anything but what was in their rations. I guess they had candy in their rations, but chocolate and things like that. But chewing gum or something like that was a treat, and she religiously sent that to him. And then it got to the point where he requested, hey, could you send me some more gum or something because I can't get it here or something. I don't know if I can find it or not, but in this, but there's a form that you're interested in. It'll take too much time, but I have someplace in here. I have his last letter. I should have been better prepared. But I think in his last letter, he was commenting that he was looking forward to having that combat knife, and he was also looking for some more chewing gum, and he was asking, don't give any more blood because he figured he was doing our share, and so on and so forth. So.
How did your family receive the news that your brother had passed away?
It was a day I'll never forget. As I say, my father worked in the Erie, not depot, the Erie yards. And this particular afternoon, I had I'd come home from school, and I had chores to do. We had few chickens that we raised, and I was in charge of the maintenance, the feeding and so on, watering the chickens. And I remember I was out in the chicken area there, the chicken coop, and I came out, and my father's car drove in a strange hour. He wasn't due home for another 2 or 3 hours, because this was like, I'm guessing maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. And he was accompanied by my sister. And something told me something's wrong. And at that same time, my mother came out of the house and came out on the porch, and she said, "It's Buzz." And no one said anything. And then she uttered the worst sound I've ever heard. It was just a screech when she realized. It was a screech and a reaction to what she had felt was gonna, the message was. And then after a short period of time, I was a bystander. I wasn't involved in, in the tragic moment. They read the telegram and told the adjutant general, "I was sorry to say that your son died in the South Pacific, and further word will be forthcoming, at an appropriate time," because during that time you couldn't tell where it happened or anything like that because of the effect that it had on the campaigns that were underway. And after we got through that, my mother never, I think she anticipated this tragedy, but she would never accept it. And that after that happened and things settled down, she still believed that he was still alive, and she commenced from that point on buying every war book that was available. And I'm talking volume after volume, like encyclopedias and stuff. And she would search through all the pictures that she could get her hands on to find maybe a picture of him at a later period of time, which would prove that the telegram was wrong. Well, she never did, and then there wasn't much doubt that it wasn't him. It wasn't like killed in action because he died in a hospital, And then even during the later years, when he was exhumed in the Warkworth area in New Zealand, they opened the grave and examined the corpse and made a report, like badly decomposed, but they verified the dog tag was still in the corpse or on the corpse or whatever, and it verified the tag that was on the marker on the grave, so there was no doubt there. And they even took fingerprints, which I have, handprints of the corpse, to prove through that means that there wasn't any mistakes made. So there was never any doubt that it wasn't him. But my mother, it was just a maternal reaction, I guess, that would make her not accept the fact and not give up hope, I guess. So, and as I say, that was a very, very terrible day, to say the least. But, so.
Who in your family started the investigation into your brother's death?
Basically myself. I know there were, in the early stages, in the early days, during still the war still going on, my sister and my mother used to send letters requesting more information and stuff, but for some reason that information wasn't, anything that was generated wasn't too satisfying. You just didn't seem to learn too much. And then later on, I decided, as long as I became custodian of the residue of his life, you know, the belongings and things. And being the very last, when I say member of the generation who experienced it to the degree that I did, I figure I had an obligation to try to bring it all together into a package that might be of interest to some person. Now maybe that's happening now, I don't know, but I was thinking along more selfish lines, thinking the family. But unfortunately, even I have 2 children, 2 boys I'm proud of. They're, as time passes, there's less and less interest from the offspring as to what happened in, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years from now. They just, I guess it's a natural thing, but there isn't too much interest. And but I figured that at least I could put it all together, all that I could get. One of the problems is time. It's, well, today is December 3rd, and in 2 days, it will be 59 years since his death, and the trail is very cold. And I have succeeded, or managed to make some contacts in New Zealand from people who were there and who are searching for me. But I don't anticipate that there's going to be much material coming up because, for example, the 39th General Hospital that was built during the war is gone, and for all I know, it's just a field or another building is there or something, and most of the people are dead. And so there isn't much information available. And one of the biggest problems was the fire in Kansas City in '73. That made a big hole in the information train, or whatever you say. It made it very difficult. And for an example, I don't know if I have those pictures. I know I have them, but as I say, that's him right there, and then there's a picture of my brother there when he was someplace. And these are deceased. There's an article in our paper, and these are all deceased guys. And Charlie Kuhn made me a copy of this, which, as I say, anything that I have, you're perfectly welcome to look it over. Oh, there's his airplane hanging in the museum. That's what you see there.
Very colorful.
And it's funny because it's almost the same color as it was when he had it, which is, maybe that was a standard thing. I don't know. Oh, I'm so disorganized. But I thought I had someplace. These are letters from people in New Zealand who I correspond with. Thank God for the internet. I guess I'm not going to come up with it right off the bat. No, it's not. It's in here someplace. What I was trying to find is that there was, if I reread this one article here, this article, it would tell me how many guys marched out of town that evening, but with Company L was called. They had a reunion a year ago, and I don't know what happened. I didn't get invited to the reunion this year. Maybe they didn't have one, but they had a reunion at Beeman's Restaurant there in the Heights on Grand Central Avenue last a year ago, October I guess it was, and there was only 8 fellas left, you know, and they were old, decrepit, and maybe this year there wasn't enough to have a meeting. But I just realized that I didn't get notification that they were having one, so maybe they didn't have a reunion. God, I wish I could find that.
What year did you request your first?
Hmm?
What year did you request your first information?
Oh, I probably started, let's see. I guess I started getting, really sensitized to it probably in 1998 or so. I've been at it quite a while, but everything takes forever to, you send a letter or something, and it takes forever for a response, and it's a very, very slow process.
What offices have you contacted?
I've contacted several government agencies that are available, information records departments, the death departments, or whatever you call it, people who were involved with the records of casualties and that sort of thing. I've gone through our local Veterans Affair, Mark Fisher over here, he's been very helpful. I've gotten a lot of help from Emil Holden's office up there, a sweetheart by the name of Wendy Yeomans, has helped me push on with my crusade. She's written letters, and if you have Emil Holden's name on the bottom of it, I think it commands a lot more attention than if it were signed Don Quinn or something like that, because I guess I would be an amoeba as far as life goes. There was a picture I was looking for, that's Buzz. But this is all that's left who are available to come to the reunions of the Company L, and we're talking about maybe a couple hundred guys or so. And there was 8 of them, I think, in attendance at that meeting. And of course, there's a few out there that just can't travel and maybe, too far away or too decrepit. And this is a copy of the dreaded telegram, and it says the second. Let's see, it's to my mother, Mrs. William P. Quinn, Secretary of War, asks that I assure you of his deep sympathy in the loss of your son, Private First Class William C. Quinn. Report received states that he died 9 January in the Pacific area. A letter will follow. A letter follows, and that's from the Adjutant General. And that's a terrible thing to receive. And these are kind of the blow-by-blow combat reports during that period of the 27th Infantry. There's many divisions in infantries, and it's hard to keep them all sorted out, but I have managed to weasel out enough information here that pretty much describes what happened in pretty good detail up until the last month. And then from the last month, it's a blur. I can't seem to do any better than that. And as I say, I still have people, agencies, government agencies, National Archives, and you're probably familiar with a lot of these things, or will be by the time you get through this program you're working on. But I am pretty much, by next year for sure, I'll call off the dogs. It'll be 60 years, and I don't think that there's going to be anything short of a miracle that I'm going to learn. There's a Department of the Army, U.S. Army Personnel Command. There's so many agencies that are out there, and that's another problem. There's so many places to references of information that's available. But all of these things are little places you could write and get this book or that book or whatever and get a little piece of information. But there simply just isn't enough time to do it. One of my greatest desires, which will never materialize, would be to retrace his steps from Guadalcanal to New Zealand and so on and so forth. It'll never happen because it's costs too much money and it wouldn't be the right thing to do, so that's pretty much that story.
Would you like to go through the medals now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let me grab the camera. Yep, I'm ready to
You're
go.
on the air. Well, this is just kind of a pile of material that has accumulated, is not organized or anything. As I say, this is his military picture, or whatever you say, and then his civilian picture. That's what he looked like. These are some of the medals that he was awarded. I have from the military's awards branch a description. He received the Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal with 3 bronze stars denoting his participation in 3 battle campaigns, and a bronze arrowhead denoting participating in an assault landing. Then he received the American Defense Service Medal and a World War II Victory Medal, marksmanship badge with a rifle bar, and honorable service lapel button, which would be here. And but whether that's a complete list, I'm not sure.
See this one? Okay.
This is I don't know if it'll pick up, but this is an article that was in the paper the day that he was the funeral in Elmira, when he finally returned to Woodlawn Cemetery. Interesting to note that the funeral cost, the Charles Hughes funeral director handled this, and the bill for this particular funeral was $92, which is very
Very different from today.
interesting. Let's see, what else? This is I neglected to say, he also was a glider pilot, and this is his student glider pilot certificate, which was dated, I suppose, 1930. Oh, this was 1940, so that was just prior to his leaving. This is an interesting thing associated with his flying. This was his navigation instrument. It was let's see if I get it right. It was a circle. It had the points of the compass marked off on it, and the way it was used, a string. You put a string through the hole in the center, and you move the string around to where you what your heading was, and that's how you navigated from place to place. It was pretty crude, but I guess high tech for those times. I forget. This is some more calculating wheels for distances and gasoline consumption and stuff like that, of that nature. These are photographs. They're all pretty much the same people. All these fellows were killed. This was Buzz, and this was Ward Mott, who went from California, no, from Hawaii actually. From Hawaii, he went to the European campaign, and he's killed. And I think this fellow is named Gerald Stern. He was killed in the South Pacific, as I recall. So they're all deceased, and that's pretty much. This looks like it might be this is a birth certificate, which doesn't mean too much to anyone. And there's a think these are some more medals. These are 2 cartridges that I picked up after the burial when they played taps and had the 20, or they shoot the guns. These were some cartridges that I picked up from that. This is another, it's an award for bayonet practice. I don't know what it's called.
Were these medals sent to your family, or did he have them with him out in the...
Well, we don't know, because being married, his wife, who left the family after his death, we never knew if any material came to her. And the way it's set up right now with the government with regard to medals, you were allowed a second issue, and these would be an issue. I don't know whether the first or the second, but anyway, these are an issue that were sent to me as the second issue. And so he may have been awarded the medals, and then his wife, who is deceased now, she remarried, and she may have received them, but there was no contact after that period of time. This is the combat knife that was made for him at the Remington Rand plant during the war, and it's interesting that it has his name on it, and it's dated 11/11/1943. Well, that'd be November 1943. Well, that's Armistice Day, which is kind of interesting, and it's the knife that he wanted, but it arrived too late. He didn't get to enjoy it. It's interesting that it has a pretty, for the time, a standard leather handle, but it terminates with a nose of a 50 caliber machine gun bullet to make it fancy.
And it is double-edged.
Yeah, it's double-edged, and
was that standard as well?
and it's designed to go almost through
a
person's body, so that it'll do a good job. The reason it's kind of rough. I used to hunt deer, and I used to carry the knife for that purpose, so it would be in better condition had I not done that. But
now, did Remington Rand make many of these daggers?
All I can say is several were made. Numbers I don't know, but it was quite a popular thing, because it seems strange that there would be such a need for a hand knife, for combat. But there was a demand for it, and so the folks at the Remington Rand used to build them as their extra effort, I guess you'd say, something like that.
Huh.
And this is his flying helmet when he was doing his barnstorming, I guess you'd say, which is kind of interesting. And I guess that's pretty much it. As I say, I have a package here which contains a video record of the last reconstruction of his airplane by those folks in Texas, and I've talked with in contact with a museum person, and it's quite a notable thing, because they sent me a T-shirt that they have issued showing the plane.
Can we unfold the T-shirt?
Sure. You want to? Let's push these things over here. Maybe, I don't know if I should let you do this. Women are better with
it's okay.
materials like that.
And it's the Science Spectrum in Lubbock, Texas.
They sent me a pen, which has the plane flying in it. I don't know if you can see that. And they sent me a history of that particular airplane, which is very interesting, and it's kind of especially interesting because the engine, the OX-5 engine, was made up in Hammondsport in the Glenn Curtis factory. There's a shoulder patch, I guess you'd call it, of the plane, and they sent me a photo of the last flight that the plane ever took. The guy decided to give it to the museum, but he wanted to take it out one more time, and his wife's in the front seat and he's in the back seat, and they flew it and then they gave it away. So that's kind of kind of interesting. I don't know, this is just I guess this is just a letter describing the plane and so on. And that's pretty much it. As I say, the stats on the plane are very, very interesting. There's an article about the plane and its donation and into the museum, which again is interesting but time-consuming to read at this point. I think that's pretty much it. We're at the bottom of the bag.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing the story
Well,
with us.
I appreciate it. I hope that maybe my contribution will benefit someone down the line. Oops.
Today is December 3rd, 2002. This is the end of tape 2 of an interview with Donald R. Quinn. Donald Quinn was a teenager during World War II. His brother, William Quinn, was a private in the U.S. Army, Company A, 27th Infantry Regiment, 25th Infantry Division. He enlisted in October 1941, and he died on January 9th, 1944. This is the conclusion of the interview with Donald Quinn. My name is Heather Wade, and we are at the Chemung County Historical Society at Elmira, New York.